Let me introduce our second speaker, Bhavani. She's working as a senior DevOps engineer at Zscaler and organizer at Women in Cloud Native. She's a passionate speaker and blogger. Over to you, Bhavani.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining the event today. And thank you, Humble, for inviting me as a speaker to this event. So let me share my screen. So today I'm gonna discuss about Gitops with ArgoCD. It's a kind of a giving you a beginner understanding of what is Gitops and how ArgoCD helps in managing like a Gitops flow. So, okay. So before going to the next 1 second, just 1 minute, Mike. Okay. So 1 minute, my system got stuck somehow. Okay.
No worries, you can reshare.
It's called the demo effect. It always strikes at the worst possible time. No worries. In the meantime, if anybody has questions, make sure you can message it in the. Remember, you can message it in the chat. We will curate them and ask at the end of the session. There's also an option to raise your hand and at the end of the session, and you can have a live Q&A as well. Are we good, Bhavani?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah,
It
we can
got
see us.
stuck. Yeah. So okay, let's get started with the with the talk today. So before going to explain, so just a small introduction about me. So I'm a senior DevOps engineer, working as a senior DevOps engineer with Zscaler. So I also organize. So far we are like hosting a virtual workshops, and so I'm an organizer at Women in CNCF, also a CNCF enthusiast, and I love to speak at conferences, and I write blogs on cloud native projects and Kubernetes around. So you can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn with this, Bhavani Indukuri name there. So I'm also a certified Kubernetes administrator. So been with the CNC of from last couple of months, and been trying to do my best with sharing my knowledge with the community. So that's all about me. So before so what are the things that I'm going to discuss today is like, so what is GitOps? So GitOps principles, and so I'm going to explain about features and use cases, and so drawbacks of GitOps, and I'm going to cover the Argo CD and its architecture, and I'll show you a live demo of like how things happen with Argo CD. Okay, so feel free to ask me questions if you have any in the middle or end of the discussion, and I'm good to answer those. So probably you all might have heard about DevOps, and probably few of you have heard about GitOps as well. So what is a GitOps is like using a Git as a source of truth for your uh, the complete end-to-end deployment process, from starting from the continuous integration to the continuous deployment. So it's like Git is a source of truth for everything that you code. It's not that. So for like how it happens is developers develops the code, like the application code, and then a CI pipeline is gets triggered, and then someone will deploy that to the production environment, right? So now, it's not just the application code or like the configuration code, everything. So whatever that you wanted to deploy to the production, so the whole process, whatever the things that involves, everything is like gets stored as a manifest file Git is the source of truth for everything to be run through the pipeline. So that's where the GitOps comes into picture. It just makes sure that you use Git to make everything automated. Okay, so here if you just look into so it's like so we are using everything like infrastructure configuration application, everything is stored in a Git repository and the CI pipeline will run. So what does that mean? Like you have, so developer develops the code and then it gets pushed to Git, a CI pipeline triggers, which like builds the builds the project and run the unit test, run integration tests, and then just build an artifact and then push create a Docker image, push to a registry, and from there so whatever the image, like your code is so your application is created with a new image, that new image gets applied to Kubernetes manifest. Like you're gonna tell in the Kubernetes manifest that I want to deploy this version of my image to the Kubernetes cluster, right? So from there, like it will automatically fetch, like so there is a change in my Kubernetes manifest repository, so I need to deploy this to my cluster. So what does that mean? Like whenever a developer commits the changes to the code, it will automatically go through this whole pipeline and deploy to the Kubernetes cluster. That what GitOps flow is. So here if you look like when a developer creates a new branch and commits the changes, push, and the CI will trigger and it gets reviewed. And then once you merge it, now the next part is the CD part, which automatically deploys these changes to the Kubernetes cluster. So the GitOps agenda is to always look at the desired state with that you define in Git repository and apply those changes to the in the Kubernetes cluster, the actual state. Okay, so that's what the major idea of GitOps is, to automate end to end from integration to deployment. So if you look at like DevOps, it's mostly, the pipeline will be till you run the continuous integration and the deployment side. So whether you're gonna use kubectl apply to deploy those changes or some other things to deploy, but so this GitOps will try to automate the end-to-end delivery process as well. So without you manually, going and applying things, it will automatically checks the changes in Git repository and apply the changes. So if you look at here, so GitOps usually, suggests you use two repositories. For one is for application code and the other is for your infrastructure code, like the manifest, Kubernetes manifest, and all of that. So here, like so the user merges, whenever an application code gets merged, as I told, like it went through the continuous integration pipeline till the end to the pushing your image to the registry, and then it triggers the so the whole pipeline will again trigger the to change that specific a PR, like PR will get merged to this Kubernetes manifest repository, changing the image version. And here in the actual state in the Kubernetes cluster, we have a GitOps operator which runs on any one of the Kubernetes cluster, which automatically looks for the changes in the Kubernetes manifest repository, and if it finds there is a change, it just applies those changes. So the end-to-end pipeline you get to see from building to deploying to the Kubernetes cluster is everything is like automated and using the GitOps way. Okay. So there are like so the major principles of GitOps is, so one is like we have four major things. So declarative and the version and immutable, pull automatically and continuously consistent. What is declarative means? So there are like two types. You can apply the you can run things in Kubernetes cluster, like, or any other infrastructure as code or any other things. So one is like imperative way. Imperative way, and other is a declarative way. So what does that mean by imperative way is, so you want to create a deployment. So if you run like kubectl create deployment, you run the commands going into the cluster and just run those commands to make things happen. That is imperative way of deploying things. So whereas the declarative approach is that everything you, so whatever that you wanted to do in the cluster, you just have a manifest file, YAML file, where you've written all the things to be done. Like you define the what is image, how many replicas, like where to deploy service, how to expose this. Everything is like a manifest file, and you store that in Git. That's the major idea of GitOps, right? So that's where the declarative nature is very important in GitOps. And since we are storing everything in Git, so it is versioned, and if something happens, you can easily revert back, just like a Git revert, and then you can be able to get back to the previous state, and you have all the version information, like whatever the changes that you do. This is very important because if someone manually applies the changes to your cluster, so Kubernetes cluster, and you, without knowing, like so you wanted to change something, so there may be conflicts with the manual changes. So the other person never know what changes the other person did. Also so that may conflict with the changes that this person wanted to do. So it is always a bad idea to apply changes manually in the Kubernetes cluster. So if you follow this process of declarative nature, so everything is versioned. So the first point of source of truth is the code, and then you just deploy it from there. And so pulled automatically means like we have a GitOps agent which runs on your cluster, which keep on monitors and pulls the changes to your cluster automatically without you have to do some manual things to make the changes getting applied to your cluster. So the fourth one is like continuously reconcile. As I said, like it continuously keep on checking if there is any change, then it just applies. Okay. And so they are like, as I said, these are the main use cases. One is single source of truth, everything is code. Not just your application code, everything you're just coding. So, and the application code, infra code, and so the whatever the Kubernetes, infrastructure that you're writing, everything is in like code. And so its rollback is easy, and so you have an easy auditing in the sense like you have all the information, like what changes are done, and what are the things is being updated in your repository. And the CI/CD automation, the major benefit of GitOps is the continuous delivery pipeline. So that will help you with the to automate end to end the continuous CI and CD, end to end, right? So it's not only the continuous deployment of your application code, it's the infrastructure code, and even your cluster resources. You can automate the deployment using GitOps. And so the other thing is like detecting and avoiding configuration. I'll tell you one of my personal experience when I work with in my work experience, right? So I worked on a Kubernetes upgrade, and then we've seen there are like some, manual changes that are happened in the cluster without being added to the Git. So when I have to upgrade, so I have to do some changes, and I have to get the diff of what is there in the cluster and what is there in the Git repository, and I have to reapply back. Because like we never know like what happened, if it's manually applied. So at the end, like if you just again apply things from the code, this manual changes that you did is going to be erased, right? So it will be a problem. So when you use like ArgoCD, which I'll explain in the next slides, it just makes sure that if someone manually changes in the cluster after you have ArgoCD in place, so it will alert you that it won't allow you that it reverts those changes in the cluster. It just always makes sure that the Git is the source of truth. Whatever that is there in your repository gets deployed to the your cluster. That's it. Okay. And so it's that you can deploy to multiple cluster. It's not that one cluster. So if you have one operator in GitOps operator in one of the clusters, so you can use deploy things on multiple clusters using the same operator. Okay. So there are some drawbacks too. So one is like, because like everything is Git, so when you have a multiple commits, it may encounter the conflicts that you manually have to resolve things. And so too many Git repositories, because like GitOps suggests to have one repo for application code, one for manifest, storing the Kubernetes manifest or the infrastructure side. So I mean, like it's up to you, whether you wanted to have a single repo with probably different folders of the application code and the infra code and design in that way. But you may end up with many repositories than the previous state actually. And doesn't centrally manage the secrets. What does that mean is like, so since we are storing everything in Git, so we're going to end up storing secrets as well, right? So GitOps doesn't have any solution for that yet. So which means that, so if you store your secrets like Kubernetes secrets, it will be encoded, and but it still be visible if you decode that secret. So you just need to rely on some external secret management tools like hash called Vault or something like that to manage with that part. And so auditing may be insufficient at some extent, because like you have to, for example, you want to find how many times it got deployed, so you just need to go to the history and figure that out, or find some ways to get that information. Okay, so this is the basic view of what is GitOps. The major thing that I can tell you is to just start with the Git. So we just run everything like the build artifact, run tests, build artifact, and then you just create a new image with your application code and send it to the registry. From the registry, it will trigger, it will change your application code, your Kubernetes manifest to use that image. And from then, so this whatever the GitOps operator which is running your cluster, which is running in your cluster, will keeps on polling if there is any change, and it figures out there is a change, and it will automatically apply that change to your cluster. So that is the entire idea of what GitOps is. Okay, so now let's get started with, like, there are multiple GitOps tools, so ArgoCD, FluxCD, Jenkins X, and there are like Atlantis, multiple tools that are available. But ArgoCD is like most popular, like so people are go it's kind of a go-to for continuous delivery solution. So now in the industry, so it's the same, like it's what GitOps tool. So it is like declarative and delivery tool for the Kubernetes, mainly designed for Kubernetes. And so similar to what I said, like it just keeps monitoring the repository and make sure that it deploys the changes in the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So any modification made to the desired target state in the Git repo, it will be automatically applied to the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. So if you just look into this architecture, uh, so so here, like, so we have ArgoCD. So users, I mean, like, we can create an application in ArgoCD through UI or CLI. So once you create an application, so I'll show you this while I'm going through the demo. But once you create an application in ArgoCD, so you what does that mean is, like, you point to a Git repository. You mentioned while creating a application in ArgoCD, you're gonna tell about, like, what is the repository that I need to monitor for. Okay, so once that is created, so what happens is, like, so ArgoCD, once the user approves the PR, and things gets merged to your code base, application code base. So either ArgoCD has this polling time of 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes, it's going to check if there are any changes in your Git repository, and based on that, if it finds the change, it will just deploy to your cluster. Okay, so and either it can pull the changes like every 3 minutes it can pull, or you can also define through GitHub, like I mean, example, like GitHub, you can define a webhook event to let ArgoCD know that there is a change, so that it will pull immediately. Okay, so whenever there is a change, it just trigger an event, and it just ArgoCD knows it doesn't have to wait for 3 minutes of polling time. and it will just deploy those changes in the in the clusters that you're in. Okay. So, and the other thing is it can also notify into Slack, and so it can define metrics, Prometheus, and all of that. So the ArgoCD server is actually it's a gRPC API, which is so that it is available for either it can be used by UI CLI of ArgoCD, or you can from Jenkins as well. So as you know, like Jenkins is a continuous integration tool, right? So from Jenkins as well, you can actually use this API to trigger the ArgoCD deployments and all of that. So that's all about the architecture. So any questions so far? Any questions? No.
No questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay. Let me get started with the demo. So there's my Kubernetes kubectl. Okay, so here, previously I have the ArgoCD installed on my machine. It's very simple. So on my cluster, I mean, say like that's where, like, when I'm just things that gets deployed, there are like multiple pods. You can see this is an ArgoCD server which kind of handling the API requests, and the notifications controller, application controllers is keep on monitoring if there is any change in Git, and then try to replicate the production. And so we have a repo server which has the cache of the Git repositories to be used by the ArgoCD. These are the multiple services, like deployments which gets deployed. So I think you can use this file, if you just see. So one second, I'll just close this. Okay. So you can see this is like the installation YAML that I've used. So I just ran kubectl apply on this YAML file. So this is ArgoCD is a custom resource definition with so with all the the configurations that is needed to deploy ArgoCD in your Kubernetes cluster. So if you can just look into ArgoCD documentation on how to install. So I just applied this thing. I created an ArgoCD namespace and I applied this change, and now I have ArgoCD deployed in my cluster. So now so I just need to open so either I can enable. So if you see, this ArgoCD server is right now is like a cluster IP service types, which means that I can access only internal. It's not exposed to external yet. So, but for the time being, I'm just using a Kubernetes port forward, and I'll just open up the ArgoCD UI for you. Okay, so I'm just port forwarding this. Okay, so and then I'll just open. Just open this. Okay, so I'm just port forwarding to 8080 of my local host. So I'm able to log into this. Just logging in. Okay, see, this is the ArgoCD UI. Okay, so you can see this. I don't have any applications getting deployed yet, but so we will do it and now. So there are a couple of settings that you can do it here. Like you can set up repositories. I mean, like you can just set up I just want to connect to this repository, add a repository, so that while creating the application, you can directly refer to that repository. And you can define the clusters by default. If if you have multiple clusters, you have to define those clusters here. Otherwise, like it will take the default cluster that is that is running inside the cluster. I mean, wherever the ArgoCD is running, it will take that cluster as a default cluster. And the project means so by default we have a default project which has all the permissions. But if you want to have some, for example, you want to give this to multiple teams, and they, you can restrict what they can do, what they can deploy. So all those things can be defined using the project settings. Okay. Like what is the project name and all the details, you can, for example, here you can see, right? So what are the destinations, so which cluster you want to, it is like all clusters, and so what is the source repositories, you can tell I want this specific repository, so for this project I want only these repositories to be monitored and not all the repositories, kind of, these kind of restrictions that you can enable with the project. And so it's like accounts information and the keys, certification details and all of that. So let's get started and deploy an application. So I have like GitHub. So I have I'll show you this thing. Okay. So I have my one of the repository. So where now this is the repository I wanted to use for this demo, and I'm just going with a simple app. So this is where I have to get started with. Okay. So here, like if you just look into here, so I have only this deployment.yaml. So where I'm just doing a simple web application deployment and a service to and enable this to a node port actually. Okay. So I have this information, and now what I'll do is like I'll just deploy this thing to my Kubernetes cluster using an ArgoCD. Okay. So how I'll do, I'll just create a new application. I'll just give like simple web app and the project. So I'm just going with the default one. So the sync policy, whether you want to automatically sync or you want to manually sync. For now, I'm just using a manual sync. So we have to manually sync to get this deployed to the Kubernetes cluster. So here, like there are multiple sync options. So I'm using auto create namespace. So which means that it will create a namespace for this thing. Like you can specify the namespace. I mean, like which namespace you want this application to get deployed to. I'm just using a simple, or else like I'll just use a web app namespace. Okay. And repository URL, I just need to give this thing. Just using the HTTPS. Okay. And just using this. Okay. And the path, so here we're using a simple web app, right? So /simple app. It's the one. Okay. Simple app. And the destination is like the default cluster, the cluster where I deploy the ArgoCD. And then I think that's all. We can just create this. See, you can see that this application gets created, and you also see it is saying that missing out of sync, which means that the cluster is not in sync with the application which is created here. Okay. So what I have to do right now is like let me just click on sync. So since I have selected for manual sync, it is asking me to we have to manually do it. Otherwise, it will be automatically getting sync. Okay. So I'm just clicking on synchronize here. If you see, like you can just click on here. Okay. So there are like two things: simple service and the deployment. You get to see there is a replica set gets created and a pod gets created. Okay. So you can view the entire flow here. So like what is happening and all of that. So if I just get back to here, I'll just open a new window. Okay. So to get all -n. So I deploy to web app, right? Web app namespace. Okay. I didn't use alias. Okay. See, you can see this happen, right? So your so now I just created application through ArgoCD, and it gets deployed in my cluster. So, and you can see this service and deployment, and you can actually go and check this 3100. So it's like I'll just, it's my, see, this is my IP of my Mac, and then since I just use a node port to expose that service to 3100, and you can see this application is running in Kubernetes, and now this happened. So now let's do one thing. Let's change the code. I'll change the version to 2.0 in my repository, and you can just it will get deployed over there. Okay. So yeah, the simple app. I'm just changing it here. Okay, just update it. 2.0. Commit changes. P2. Just updating the changes. Okay, I'm done updating the changes. Then just go back and then just check the applications. So here, so it did not yet know that there is a change happened. You have to wait for 3 minutes. It's like it will the polling time is 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes it gets it's going to check for the repository, but you can still update those settings to decrease the time frame and all of that in ArgoCD configurations actually. The other thing is like the other approach is to use a GitHub webhook. So as soon as you change a GitHub file in GitHub, so if you just create a webhook to point to this ArgoCD, my ArgoCD URL, so it will just ArgoCD will know right away, and it will deploy the changes. So I just need to I just have to I'm just clicking on this. I'm just clicking on refresh to, so that it will just poll right away. Okay. So see, you're seeing this, it is out of sync. Okay, so which means that there is a change happened in the repository, and it is able to fetch that information, and you can see here this yellow mark, right? So it is saying like where it is getting changed as well. So now I just so what I will tell you, so you can see so there is like commit information and all of that as well, like out of sync deployment. So let me just click on sync now, and I'll just synchronize. So this is like for demo purpose, I'm just showing you, but if you have a GitHub webhook and automatic sync, so everything will be done right away. So you don't have to do the synchronize and refresh with that when you enable it in production. So now if you see here, so you get to see one pod is getting deleted with the previous version, and then another pod gets created here. And now it's so you see that so this commit message gets updated. I've committed using like with the message saying update deployment YAML to v2, and it is showing that is happening, and it gets synced and healthy right now. So which means that whatever the change I made in gets synced to my my cluster and the application. Okay, so I'll just try to open my terminal. Okay, so now so if I just run this thing, and you can see this is up and running, and I'll just show you, because like I changed the version. If I just refresh this, see now the version gets updated, it gets automatically deployed. So this is how ArgoCD works. So whether you can deploy an application through ArgoCD UI, or through from here, like ArgoCD UI, you can create an application so that it will keep on monitoring that repository and deploy things in your cluster. Or you can use ArgoCD CLI also to make things happen. We have ArgoCD CLI, which I'm not covering right now, but so you can do that way. There is another way. So you might have think why I have to go to this UI and do things. Then you can just use it in declarative way, which means that an application.yaml, which I'll show you that as well. So you just need to apply the application.yaml. So whatever that you're doing with UI, you can just write it as an YAML and you can deploy that as well. So I'll just go to this folder like ls. Okay. So I'll just show you this file, application.yaml. So this is like what I'm just trying to tell you. So whatever that I did in UI, so like you're mentioning the what is the repository URL and what is the revision and then the path. This is a different app that I'm explaining to you, but you can destination, which server Kubernetes cluster I want to do, what is the namespace, and all these details you're defining it through a declarative way. Now, so what I'll do is like I'll just do kubectl apply -f application.yaml. So, sorry, I didn't use alias, right? Okay, alias case. So now, so it is telling me that the application gets created. If you look at the UI, you can see that this guest book gets created since it was like manual sync by default. So you just go there and then you have to just click on sync and then space synchronize. Okay, so you can see this, the replica set is getting created and the pod gets created and it will get deployed to here. kubectl get all, else I'll do this thing. kubectl get all hyphen and so what is the guest book, right? Okay. See, you can see this, so the service deployment and the everything gets created here. The pod is, I think, getting created now. It's not yet ready. So it's like container creating state. Okay, so this is how you use ArgoCD to make sure that whatever the changes in Git, it will automatically deploy things in your Kubernetes cluster in production. So in production, like what is the best ways to enable a Git hook so that whenever you did a change in your repository, it will automatically synchronize. So I just showed you an automatic sync, but manual sync, but it will automatically synchronize and then it will deploy your application to production. So I think that's all I have for the presentation. Okay, that's all I have right now. I'll just look. There seems like there are some questions. In the sense, I know many companies are using it. Okay, I'm just trying to. This is all about the Gitops and ArgoCD that I wanted to discuss. Feel free to let me know like if you have any questions.
Hello, hi Bhavani, Kiran here.
Hi. Yeah, hi Kiran.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for a beautiful insight on DevOps and GitHubs and ArgoCD. I have a few questions related to on GitHubs versus DevOps. Basically, I think if you can go to the in your initial, I think the third or fourth slide.
Okay.
So, I mean, as far as I understand, what I understood is that the main difference between a GitOps and DevOps is that GitOps, that a developer will commit the code and automatically it will start the pipeline, right? Is that the only major difference between GitOps and DevOps?
So DevOps, in the sense, like GitOps is also DevOps, part of a DevOps, you can say. But here, like, so usually in so whatever so far, like in GitOps that people are doing is like they have end-to-end automation till like build unit tests, like building image and the image registry. So after that, they're like usually apply the changes to the Kubernetes manually, or or they use some like again they have multiple tools for enabling this production. So if you use a GitOps, what we are doing is we are automating the whole flow. Like so from the point of whatever the changes happen in the code, you're deploying everything to the actual state in the cluster, which means it's not only the application code. So I mean, this is the trend people are trying to move in their product right now. So
Understand.
everything is code. Like so, we have Terraform like infrastructure as code. So if I would say if you are in Kubernetes already, enabling the GitOps will help you to automate the delivery process of your product. So this CI will already there. That's what like so what we're doing so far in DevOps. Now using a GitOps, you just make Git as a source of truth and make the end-to-end automation till delivery of your product the uh, Kubernetes cluster. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Thanks, Bhavani. So let's say if in my project, if I want to transition into GitOps from DevOps, we have this requirement that every deployment request need to be, as a part of audit requirement. So every request comes through a particular tool called ServiceNow or, Remedy.
Okay.
So the user will come and raise the request there, and then eventually it will be taken up using a ServiceNow API, and through which will be called by a Jenkins pipeline, and it will get deployed to the platform. So
Okay.
that's the setup that we are using in our project currently. So let's say if we want to transition into GitOps in future, which I feel is more seamless and more futuristic. How do we go about auditing the requirements, like auditing the request basically, if we don't use a tool like Remedy or ServiceNow?
Okay. So what I mean is, so I mean, like you can think of, integrating your whatever the DevOps pipeline with GitOps. Like, so this is mainly into, if you are running into Kubernetes, and so I would say in DevOps, like we can do multiple ways. Either we can do things like infrastructure is being managed by us, the DevOps engineers, and they can do like manually create things here and there, like use multiple tools, and they can use sometimes they can just go out to the cluster and deploy things, and sometimes they can just go to the UI and do things. So instead of doing the kind of go that interaction of a DevOps engineer using a multiple things, so through a different approaches, like whether it's like manual apply or UI. So the GitOps will help you to make like everything as code. Right now we have the facility of doing this, like because like in Kubernetes environment, whatever that you do, so everything is like you see, like you have seen the CNC of landscape, right? So for every Kubernetes problem, there are like projects coming up with solutions, and so the declarative approach is becoming popular. So the main attention of GitOps is to without we involving in the middle, just make everything automated through and acting a Git as a source of truth actually. So with your existing pipeline also, I think you have all the deployments, or everything is done. But if probably for some extent, like you want to make sure that everything is like in code, and so that then you can use GitOps and make things automated using GitOps.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
One last question. Sorry to take up your time.
No,
Let's
no.
say, yeah. Let's say if we have multiple teams who are working on the same project and they are doing multiple commits, right? So, like, I mean, how do they? I mean, how do we categorize? Like, in this scenario, how does the GitOps will work? Like, like if we configure each commit, it will trigger a deployment, right? So if they are committing
I
multiple
mean,
into
like
the same.
I would say you can. So it doesn't mean a commit. It means that, for example, so a branch, right? A feature branch. Once you create a feature branch, the complete end to end, it will trigger a CI, and then just like how you trigger CI, you can just you're doing the CD and apply the changes. So there is an approver in the middle. So based on that decision, it will trigger the so when you change something in your Git, it will trigger the deployment. You can exclude things as well. For example, you can exclude some branches, and you can decide on the things to when it will get deployed. See, like the project settings, and there are some exclude options while creating your application. So that helps you to deal with this.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Bhavani.
Yeah, thanks. There is a question from Shubham Rai, Humble. Yeah. Is it possible to pass the specific branch of repo for which we want to create? Yes, you can do. There is a revision option, right? So where you can pass which branch you want to deploy. So used HTTP link. Any specific reason for that? Just curious. No. So I was just using that for demo purpose. You can use SSH and all the other ways using the GitHub API as well. I just, for a simple demo, I just used the HTTPS, and just I did not set up like the SSH things and all, but you can directly use HTTPS for. I'm using it for demo purpose, nothing more than that. Yeah, yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bhavani, for taking us through the GitHub workflow and introducing ArgoCD, which is a very known and popular project